Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board, also known as the IDEA Board, will be presenting its draft Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Action Plan, the IDEA Plan, to the town board and to the community tonight. I want to thank each of the members of the IDEA Board, many of whom are here with us this evening. The board is led by co-chairs Sarah Johnstone and Dr. Rashid Muhammad. And I also want to acknowledge our consultants in this work, the team from Gwen Inc., led by Gwen Weber McLeod. Tonight, the IDEA Board presents its draft IDEA plan to the community and to the town board for the first time. Now, the board won't be taking any action on the plan tonight. Instead, we hope that all of you will listen thoughtfully to the plan, to the presentation as it's presented. It will be up on our webpage, and you'll have an opportunity to share comments at a community meeting that the IDEA Board will be announcing very soon. Now, like the town's comprehensive plan, the IDEA plan is intended to serve as a roadmap for the community, but just as importantly, it's intended to advise and guide town officials and town staff with tangible goals and specific strategies for meeting those DEI goals. Today, even before the draft plan is being presented to the community, we are taking guidance from the IDEA Board and from other sources to begin to act on recommendations made in the draft IDEA plan. First, and perhaps most importantly, we've just received approval from the Monroe County Civil Service Board to hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for the town who will report directly to the town supervisor. We'll be the first town in Monroe County, probably the first town in all of upstate New York, to have a DEI officer, although such positions are common in the private sector and the education world. Hiring a DEI officer is a core recommendation in the draft IDEA plan. Last year, we established the Civilian Police Hiring Board, which now interviews candidates for new police officer positions with the Brighton Police Department, and then reports their recommendations back to departmental leadership. IDEA Board co-chair Dr. Rashid Muhammad and town board member Christine Corrado are both members of this police hiring board. Our Sustainability Oversight Committee is already working with the IDEA Board to ensure that Brighton's climate action plan will incorporate issues of equity as we work to make Brighton a more sustainable community. We're just beginning, but this IDEA plan will be a roadmap to assist us in doing much more. The town board will adopt the IDEA plan after receiving and considering your input, not just for the sake of adopting a plan, but to have a framework with specific goal recommendations that we can implement over time to make Brighton the community that reflects our aspirations when it comes to equity and inclusion for all of our residents today and for years to come. I'm pleased tonight to introduce Felicia Garcia. Well, Felicia can't be with us tonight. Felicia Garcia Hartstein, who is the first chair of the IDEA Board. Our current co-chairs, Sarah Johnstone and Dr. Rashid Muhammad. And as I mentioned before, Gwen Weber McLeod, president of Gwen Inc., our consultant for this project. And Gwen, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you everybody for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Melee, and greetings to the members of the IDEA Board that are present with us this evening. And also, I bring greetings from my company to the community members from the town of Brighton who are here to participate in this meeting, and as part of that, we'll hear our plan. I want to start by saying that it was my company's greatest honor to be engaged to do this work in partnership with a group of about 20 residents from your community to engage in a very specific charge. We were charged with, as the consultants, in supporting the IDEA Advisory Board and developing a strategic framework document that would have a set of recommendations, goals, and high-level strategies that could be used by the town of Brighton as the town, in partnership with the community, are making decisions about how you as an entity could manifest an ongoing commitment to the ideas and concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This was not an easy process. It involved 20 people with diverse points of view. It unfolded over a 2-year period during some of the most challenging times we faced as citizens, not only of our respective communities, but of our country. It also involved getting input, feedback early on from about 100 other people from your community through the form of world cafes, focus groups, individual conversations. Because as your brothers and sisters from your community were doing this work, they wanted to know what other residents were thinking about. And after that, they broke into a group of small work groups to then take on the process of starting to identify where your community could begin in doing this important work. I'd like to offer for your consideration how unique the town of Brighton is in taking on a project of this nature. As part of us beginning our work, we are thinking that what we wanted to do was find out what other communities in the country even had DEI plans. And interestingly enough to us, in our work, we only discovered about 2 or 3 other communities that had taken the step of developing a plan of this nature to guide their own decision-making about how they would manifest commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of their work. When I looked at this, one of the things we wanted to consider as your consultants is, well, what would motivate the town of Brighton to do such a thing? And as we explored that with Supervisor Melee, the steering committee, and members of this committee, 3 things that we noticed in other of our clients came to the fruition. People do this work because it's the right thing to do. And a lot of people say it's the right thing to do from a moral, social perspective. But there's also reasons that it's the right thing to do because the more government entities seek funding, those funding streams are seeking to make sure that people have fair, equitable access to the services provided by those entities. For some of our clients, it's about the bottom line. And that is also a very appropriate reason for a community to engage in DEI work. As I mentioned, funding comes forward. Companies that are looking to do business with the town of Brighton, or even maybe bring businesses to your community, are also looking to see how the community has the capacity to hold its own diverse workforce. And another reason that I think manifested itself throughout this project was that there's this belief in our clients that none of us is smarter than all of us. Our clients believe that the more they engage the diverse points of view and experiences of people who live in their community, the better skilled they'll become at having policies, practices, events, celebrations, and all kinds of other supports in their community that make sure that the community is large enough to hold all of its residents in all of your glorious diversity. My company specializes in DEI strategy development, and our 2-year experience with you has been amazing, wonderful, and as I mentioned, very unique in that you don't have other communities that are doing what you do. And one of our hopes for you is that as you begin to use this plan in service to your community, that you take pride that you are on the leading edge of communities that see formalizing a plan to guide the decision makings of your town as a real valuable resource. I'm going to introduce to you your co-chairs, Sarah Johnstone and Dr. Rashid Mohammed, to actually present some highlights from our plan in the amount of time we have allotted. However, prior to doing that, I'd like to share a slide that pays tribute to the other individuals who engaged in this 2-year process, just to say thank you and how proud we are that they committed their time. So as I mentioned, the idea of advisory board broke itself into 3 task groups to do the work. And across these groups are all of the individuals who participated in this process. And through the joy and challenge of it all, most of them chose to hang in there. And the prevailing reason why is that there was a common ground commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a resource to building a better community for all of you who live in the town of Brighton. Supervisor Melee mentioned that Felicia Garcia Hartstein was one of the original co-chairs, and we want to thank Felicia for leading this project through the first year. And now I'd like to turn it over to Sarah Johnstone and Dr. Rashid Muhammad, who are your co-chairs and who have helped us finalize the project. Sarah and Rashid.
Good evening, fellow neighbors, residents, community members of the town of Brighton. Good evening, Supervisor Mealy, Town Board, Chief Cathaldi, department heads, and others participating in this meeting. As Supervisor Mealy has pointed out, and as our colleague Gwen Weber-McLeod has pointed out, that we have engaged in a rather lengthy and robust process to lay a baseline, to start a conversation, to develop a point of departure, to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in the activities of the town of Brighton and across the broader community. The process that we've undergone for the last 2.5 years has included a very, very diverse set of backgrounds, experiences, and opinions and insights brought to the table. It's had a lot of robust discussion and also integrated different sets of points. And again, it is not something that is the end or a deliverable that stops. It is the beginning of a conversation. So at a time when we are facing a great deal of rancor and animus in our national conversation, where we see these things even resident in our state and local communities, we believe that this plan and the subsequent inputs and conversations and the adaptation in the town of Brighton's planning and execution processes will be nothing but a positive and good thing. As my co-chair and I, Sarah, overview the plan tonight, again, I would offer to all of you to please look at this again as a way of formulating some very broad thoughts, taking some best practices, as Gwen has mentioned, putting them into place. And once again, Brighton is not only leading Monroe County and the state of New York in the way of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we're also leading the nation because very few communities have made this investment to go that far. At this point, I would like to turn it over to my co-chair, Sarah Johnston.
Thank you, Rashid, and thank you, Supervisor Mealy, everyone for inviting us here this evening. I'm very excited to be here. There's been an awful lot of work over the last 2.5 years, and this is really the fruition of that work. I do want to point out that this is a living plan. Brighton chartered a course, and through that course, we've created this fluid document. As you look at the document in more detail in the coming weeks, please be aware that this document also reflects a lot of what Brighton is already doing. There's so much going on in this community to be proud of and to build on, that our hope is that this plan can be used going forward to help the town in the many ways, some of which we are not even aware of yet, on how we can move forward collectively in a wonderful way. At this point, we're going to highlight just a few pages of our document. We do not have the time to go through all 20-odd pages. So when you see the document, this will be the opening page. This beautiful young lady has graced our cover. This, again, is a draft document. It is our final draft. However, it is not the final word. That is going to be written as we move forward.
You can, yes, you can go to page 13, please.
Our process over the last 2.5 years, our initial process included, as Gwen mentioned, and Rashid, engagement outside of our idea board members. We had World Cafe events, which of course had to move to a Zoom format before we all really knew how Zoom worked. Now we're all pros. We had over 100 community members participate through Zoom and smaller meetings. There were a few in-person meetings that some of our members had with teens, with their neighbor groups, and also we met with Supervisor Maley and his department leaders to get their initial thoughts on our work. This is an inclusive document. There are so many voices from a broad array of people reflected in this plan. It's a guiding document that Brighton will use moving forward with input from staff, town governance, business owners, students, and residents. Through these meetings that we had with the community, it became obvious to us on the committee that there were 6 key areas, and we'll get into those very briefly in a moment. If you could just go back back to that original slide. Each of the 6 areas had 3 elements: a focus statement, goals that were describing our desired results, and the strategies for how to achieve those goals. So now moving to page 14.
As Sarah mentioned, thank you, Sarah, there are 6 overall areas of the plan which the committees and subcommittees took a look at, provided some very robust feedback, which was distilled in this plan. It is also, I want to mention at this point, as Brighton moves forward, as Bill mentioned, having a diversity, equity, inclusion officer, we plan to share that substantive input with that person to help also inform their work. But as to the 6 areas, number 1 is communication, and we're looking specifically at helping the town of Brighton see how it promotes diverse experiences and also shares ideas and celebrates our diversity. Number 2, engagements, partnerships, and inclusion. Again, this is facilitating communication across the community. These can be things that are positive and sharing information. They can also engage in some of our tougher discussions, but the town of Brighton will be a prime player in ensuring communication is shared, best practices, ideas from other places, and also our community conversations that we want to engage in with each other. Policies and practices, the town of Brighton will reflect the needs of our diverse community. I'll come back to this just for a quick second to give a little bit more detail in that area, because it is usually a place where we want to answer some questions and people have an interest in. Economics. As we know, there is a diverse set of economics and businesses economically and historically. We're at an inflection point. We believe that the way work is done, the way work opportunities are shaped, will become more diverse going into the future. And Brighton as a community, both philosophically and in the way it's operated, is well poised to adapt and have some of those different types of things thrive in our community. Public safety. As Bill mentioned, myself and town board member Corrado and others in the community are involved with the Brighton Police Department in terms of their hiring process. There are other partnerships that are going on. Chief Cafaldi and his officers have worked very hard to be culturally sensitive and a great part of this community and working in partnership. And I think that we are starting from a point in this town very, very, very well postured and very far ahead of many other municipalities to continue that partnership. So that is one area that we think is very strong, and we're very proud of that. And in infrastructure, housing, and transportation, Sarah mentioned we're an inner ring suburb. We are part of course, a broader municipality, an ecosystem that works together in several different ways. We want Brighton to reflect that diversity in different arrays and make sure that we are incorporating those ideas, the needs, and the diversity of our community there. Back to number 3 for a quick minute before I turn it over to Sarah. Diversity, equity, and inclusion can be viewed mostly as being fundamentally qualitative in nature. The world of ideas, thoughts, feelings, perspectives, and experiences that do not necessarily have sharp boundaries on them. But in reflecting those very broad things and incorporating that into a plan, we also want to make sure that the residents understand, the town board, that there are some things that are quantitatively empirical or very straightforward. What we are recommending to the town is that there is an organizational assessment looking at areas of strength and opportunity for DEI. As Bill mentioned, that we have a DEI officer is also being worked into the process. But recruiting, training, and having a diverse and representative workforce using best practice strategies, also being mindful of the civil service process, which has to be attended to, increasing the diversity of the Brighton town government in order to reflect the community and show great progress in this area. And then lastly, in this area, we were asking that an annual report on progress with metrics related to DEI be produced so the town and the residents can see exactly what is being done in this area and make sure that we're securing funding in order to robustly sustain DEI efforts, and that all the departments within the town have their own strategies and metrics to qualitatively and quantitatively report back. All this involves training, all this involves effort, and all of it involves an investment, not only by the town and its leadership under Bill, but also for all of us as residents and members of this community, investing in this process, bringing our best towards it, keeping an open mind, and working with our neighbors and friends, and also our town leaders to make sure that Brighton's diversity continues to grow in the way it already has. Back over to my co-chair, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. As Rashid mentioned, Brighton is a landlocked inner ring suburb. We don't have acreage that has been unbuilt. Almost everything has been built. So now we need to change how we need to engage different strategies from what has traditionally worked in the past. Land use in particular is a challenge. But I think we're all up to that challenge. One of the items that I'm particularly excited about is on page 17, which is part of the engagement, partnership, inclusion, and representation task group focus idea. The bottom little stop sign there is support a town art committee to showcase culturally diverse artwork. Well, it can be bigger than that. I'm excited to see this reference of a town arts committee. Brighton has public art, both known and hidden. We can catalog these works. We can use local talent to increase our public art. Brighton can incorporate art to become an economic driver that encourages entrepreneurs in the creative arts, residents, students. There's no end to the creativity of those who call Brighton home. And we want to support all of that good work. This plan will be available for viewing shortly, not this evening, but very shortly. Anyone who wants to review this plan, look through it, comment on it, it will be available. And I would just like to reiterate that this is a living document. This plan is a beginning. It is a point of departure. Even though we've spent 2.5 years to get to this point, this is really the springboard moving forward. The IDEA Action Plan is a manifestation of those 2.5 years of work by members of the IDEA Board and the consultants. Brighton certainly has been living through difficult times in recent memory, as have most communities. And these challenges will be reflected in our work going forward. We intend on creating current experiences in Brighton that will influence future experiences and new generations who will make Brighton their home and be leaders for all of us. Rashid?
I would really like to thank Sarah and also Felicia for their very, very great leadership in this process. Also, the privilege of working with Gwen Inc. and her consultant team have been absolutely essential. But I would like to offer for all of us just a closing thought. We have an opportunity here to take something that is wonderful, a wonderful community that cares about each other and that cares about the broader community that we live in. The thoughts that are reflected here are aspirational, hopeful, and forward-looking. Working together, even through the tough times that we are living through as a nation, as a world, this offers an opportunity for us to continue to build, to continue to operate and incorporate good ideas, to continue to flourish, and continue to set an example for those around us. I look forward to joining all of you in this conversation, continuing to develop this plan, but more importantly, I look forward to living the values that are espoused and reflected in here for all of us. Maybe at this time, we are joined by several of our other colleagues on the board. If any of them would like to just offer any comments or thoughts, we would certainly welcome that before we turn the meeting back over, of course, to Supervisor Maley. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present on the plan, and thank you on behalf of my co-chair and all of our colleagues on the board.
Rashid, Sarah, thank you both so much. And thanks to everybody on the committee. Most of the committee members were able to join us tonight, and that's really a testament to their commitment, not just to this plan, but to this community, and I appreciate that. Gwen, you and your team have been so much fun to work with. Many of you in the room have heard me say this before. When you came in and interviewed with us, you knocked my socks off. I feel very fortunate that we've had the opportunity to come this far on what is a journey. And as Sarah just said, if we were putting together this plan, and we've said this before about other plans, if we were putting together this plan to throw it on a shelf where it would gather dust, we would have failed. That's not why we came to this work. We came to this work because it must be a living, evolving, energizing document. And with the work of the committee, but also the work of the community, I can't underestimate how important it's going to be for us to gather feedback from members of the Brighton community as we go back out. We had comment through the World Cafes earlier. I am certainly hoping that when we come back, we will be able to do so in person, but whether it's in person or remotely, to have the opportunity to share thoughts about this plan with members of the community is going to be so important.